Hey there, friends. I really don't want to turn my back on the people over there that are still struggling to get out from under Hurricane Helene and Milton even in the Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, even Virginia, but more specifically Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. I know we focus a lot on Tennessee and North Carolina, but I don't want to forget those other folks because they are still struggling in different types of challenges in their own ways from these two hurricanes. So I wanted to make sure that I continue to touch on this so these people are not forgotten and it doesn't just go away, especially moving in to this really heavy 2 weeks of the election cycle, moving into the presidential election. I want to make sure these people still stay in the front of our minds and we understand that they still need assistance out there and some care and some help. So just want to make sure I point that out. Same time, I want to point out how the government can be a petulant child at times. Whenever they either don't get their way or you call them out on their shortcomings and the things they've done wrong, they typically pitch a fit and they get mad and they lash out. They even start to lie and make things up, and they kind of threaten you in a low-key kind of way that, hey, if you don't shut up, we're not going to offer any assistance anymore. First, guys, go check out my friends Attorneys on Retainer. These guys are not an insurance company as far as carry insurance for your firearm. These are legitimate attorneys who are just what they say. They're on retainer. These guys are ready to answer your call. When you do call, there is an on-call attorney who will take your call. So in the event you have to use your firearm, you are not dancing around with some $12 an hour phone clerk who doesn't know anything about law and doesn't know what it takes to protect you. You will be met with an attorney on the other line. Sign up now with my friends Attorneys on Retainer for optimum protection, and in the unlikely event you have to draw your carry firearm in self-defense, use my code FTATF and receive $50 off your individual sign-up fee. That's Attorneys on Retainer. You guys may or may not have heard of the guy who was arrested in North Carolina because of all these threats that were happening against FEMA. Yeah, people, militias, truckloads of militias were out there threatening members of FEMA, and of course they had to regroup, you know. First of all, they claim that they go door to door, which we saw a Glenn Beck article a couple of weeks ago that one guy who was not informed said that they went door to door. Then when they talked to the supervisor, she was like, we don't go door to door. But yet FEMA is continuing to run with this lie of going door to door.
North Carolina, where we're learning that a man was arrested after reports of an armed threat against FEMA workers who were helping victims of Hurricane Helene. Now, this comes amid a rise in false conspiracy theories about the agency, which are now threatening to slow down the recovery efforts. Janet Shamlian has that story.
44-year-old William Parsons was arrested Saturday after the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office says it received a call about a man with an assault rifle talking about possibly harming FEMA workers in the hard-hit Lake Lure and Chimney Rock areas. The U.S. Forest Service sent an email to first responders in the area that same day, warning National Guard troops had apparently encountered armed militias that were, quote, hunting FEMA. But the sheriff's office tells CBS News there have been no substantiated reports of any militias making those threats.
First thing I want to point out, look at the headline, arrest made after threat to FEMA. Remember that. It doesn't say alleged, it doesn't say rumor of threat, it doesn't say anything like that. It says that there was a threat to FEMA in North Carolina. That's very important because this article, which is also from the same publication that you just saw that news report on, debunks its own lie of there being a threat to FEMA. Now, they'll debunk this same threat later in this report, but it says right here that FEMA crews were forced to relocate due to a reported armed threat against workers. Now, at least they use the word reported right here because that adds a little bit of maybe this is a questionable threat, right? Again, going back to the headline does not say reported. It says that there was a threat. So again, remember, the average American is not going to read a news article. They are simply going to read the headline and move on. So it makes sense for them to keep the lie in the headline, knowing that they can say, oh, no, we explained it properly in the article. We just had that headline out there. You just had to read the article to tell that it was not a legitimate threat. Again, they don't correct the headline because they want the average person to take that information and run with it as if there were legitimate threats against FEMA when there, in fact, were not. Now, it says here that National Guard troops reportedly encountered armed militia saying they were hunting FEMA. That's a pretty bold claim. And National Guard troops, plural, would imply that more than one person saw this armed militia claiming that they were hunting FEMA. Now, FEMA, running with their lie again, going door to door, says that its disaster assistance teams were being stationed at fixed locations instead of going door to door, which has been the agency's common practice in the past. Again, FEMA personnel on the ground have stated they don't go door to door. This is clearly the PR machine of FEMA, not knowing what's going on the ground, or they're just outright lying on purpose. Because FEMA themselves have said, we don't go door to door. But corporate, if you want to call them that, thinks they go door to door, or they're saying this to make you think that these people are really working. We've seen them in action. The boots on the ground in North Carolina have seen them in action. They're not going door to door. Now, they made it very clear to say that the man had an assault rifle and that he said he had a comment about possibly harming FEMA. Again, they're going with the questionable nature of this charge here by saying possibly harming FEMA, when the headline again says that it emphatically happened. The man suspected of making the threat was arrested and charged with going armed to the terror of the public. Now, I took the liberty of looking this up, and elements of the going armed to the terror of the people, the elements are armed himself or herself with an unusual and dangerous weapon. A gun would satisfy this element for the purpose of terrifying others and going out on public highways in a manner to cause terror to the people. This does carry a misdemeanor charge, so not a major thing. Clearly, they did not think this guy was a threat. Clearly, this was a rumor, and all they did was slap this guy on the wrist. In fact, he had a $10,000 bond, which means he got out on paying $1,000, if they even made him pay that. They may have just let the guy out. So if there was even a little bit of a threat in this, the guy would still either be in jail or something. They wouldn't have let the guy out. They wouldn't have slapped him on the hand and said, bad boy. They would have done something more. So that means that law enforcement do not consider this man any kind of a threat. Because again, in a situation like this, volatile like this, and limited law enforcement based on the conditions there, if this guy were any kind of a real threat, they would not have let him go, only to have him do the same thing all over again. Clearly, they did not see this man as a threat. Now, the sheriff's office said the initial report stated that there was a truckload of militia that was involved. However, after further investigation, it was determined Parsons acted alone and there was no truckloads of militia going to Lake Lure. So this was a lie. The sheriffs debunked this. So that claim of this man in a truckload of militia threatening FEMA was not true. To further add to that, the North Carolina National Guard told CBS News in a statement on Monday that it had, quote, no reports of our soldiers or airmen encountering any armed militia or any threats and any type of combatants. Well, wait a minute. That can't be, right? Because wasn't it National Guard who claimed that they heard or saw this threat? That's right. National Guard troops reportedly encountered armed militia saying they were hunting FEMA. But yet the National Guard says there were no reports of our soldiers or airmen encountering any armed militia, any threats, or any type of combatants. So this was a lie. It supposedly originated from the National Guard, and the National Guard says that didn't come from us. So it's a lie. It's a rumor. It was made up. This never happened. Even the sheriff's office says their office is not aware of any additional specific and credible threats. Now, I also wanted to point out that FEMA is not going to tell you the full story here. In fact, they're going to take advantage of this to try to make you feel sorry for their employees. Remember, on their own website, FEMA's website, they have a section dedicated just to debunking rumors on this, and the one they're debunking here is FEMA pulled out of hurricane-affected areas of North Carolina due to threats. It states down here on October 12th, FEMA was made aware of a potential threat to our staff in North Carolina. We made the decision to shift from sending FEMA disaster survivors assistance teams into neighborhoods to knock on doors, which again, they do not do. This is a lie. To stationing teams at neighborhood locations where they could still meet and work with disaster survivors to help them get assistance. And here we go again with the noble FEMA workers falling on the sword of threats out there. This decision was made through our usual field operations process to ensure FEMA staff are safe and able to focus on helping disaster survivors. So the heroes of FEMA are out there fielding death threats left and right, and we're still going to be out there working because we want to help the people of North Carolina. Let me tell you something. If there was the mildest form of a threat out there, FEMA wouldn't be in the state right now. they would look for every single opportunity to bail so that they could say, see, people of North Carolina, you did this because you guys carry guns and because you guys are part of a militia and you threatened our people. Now we're gone. We're not going to do anything to help y'all. This is a shot across the bow from FEMA, kind of a warning that, look, quit talking bad about us. Quit saying we're not doing anything. Because if you don't like it, we'll pick up all of our toys and go home. This is their way of kind of a sideswipe, kind of a backhanded slap to the people of North Carolina to shut up and quit talking about FEMA because we can leave. Now, real quick, I think this is important. I wanted to summarize this entire article so that you guys can see that within this article, they debunk their own headline and do not do anything to correct it. Their own story presents the rumor and debunks the rumor. Again, in their own headline, it says threat to FEMA. That should say rumored threat to FEMA because that's what this was all about. Nothing was substantiated. It was found out to be untrue. In fact, the people supposedly that originated from said it didn't come from us. First report was that it was a truckload of militia. Then they said there was no truckload of militia. Then they said, and they made sure to call it an assault rifle, that a man with an assault rifle made a comment about possibly harming FEMA employees. Possibly. Didn't say that he made the threat. Said he made the threat about possibly doing that. They arrested the man and charged him with going to arm the terror of the public, which again is a misdemeanor, so not a very big charge, meaning wasn't much of a threat, if any of a threat. This was probably a slap on the hand. Hey guy, just be nice. But it's definitely a shot across the bow at gun owners and certainly people who are open carrying in situations like this. And remember, the report came from North Carolina National Guard. Well, the National Guard says no reports of our soldiers or airmen encountering any armed militia, any threats, and any type of combatant. So they're saying, not from us, this is a lie. Even the sheriff's office told CBS News on Monday that local law enforcement remains on high alert, but their office is not aware of any additional specific credible threats. Finally, FEMA said later on Monday that it would resume normal operations because the threat turned out to be less serious than first feared. Wait a minute. This was completely debunked. There was no threat, so it can't be less serious than first feared. Your sentence should say, FEMA said later on Monday that it will resume normal operations because there was no threat. Not that the threat was less serious than first feared. Again, this is their way of hanging on to the lie to say that, well, there was a reported threat, so it could have been a threat. This is their way to cling to that. Because if they completely make it go away, the American people are like, FEMA's lying. FEMA's not in any danger. But this is their way to say, oh, our guys are in danger. So next they're going to get harassment pay, threat pay, additional pay on top of their disaster relief extra pay and stipends that they're already getting for being out there. The thing I want to point out is notice that they talk a lot about the AR-15 and the man being armed with a rifle and a pistol. I think that this is a way for them down the road to pass some silly little stupid new law that's going to say that, kind of like what the Okeechobee police chief did wrong down in Florida. But nevertheless, this is going to be a way for people to start pitching and putting forth new laws or proposed laws that will disarm people. Like Katrina, like they tried to do down in Katrina, or they did do in some cases. I think this is a way to throw that seed out there so that they can try to do this going forward. Look for more fake news reports like this that come out that don't correct themselves, even though they literally have the additional information debunking their own headline. Look for more of this to come out throughout this entire process so they can build a case against the good people of North Carolina and Tennessee and say that, hey, these people are crazy, they've got guns, we need to disarm people. Look for them to say that and this is something Kamala Harris may actually say in the next 2 weeks, right? That armed militias with, quote, assault weapons are threatening government officials, and we just can't have that. Look for that to come out, because this will all be used to try to formulate new laws to put in place to disarm Americans. Now, one thing I got to show you guys. This next video clip is actually from Florida, and it's Customs and Border Patrol down in Florida helping with the disaster relief recovery of Hurricane Milton. Again, you heard right. Border Patrol in Florida So we have 15 if you count the camera person, 15 government employees getting paid overtime, disaster pay, per diem, probably $100,000 a year each one of them. This is $1 million project right here with 15 government employees moving firewood. That's essentially what they're doing. They're literally moving firewood, little bitty logs. 14 guys, actually one guy supervising at the end there. The 13 are moving it, the 14 is supervising, and the 15th is filming it. This is government efficiency at its peak. This is how the government operates. The only thing that could make this more government-like would have been if before it was able to be thrown into that pile, if the guy had to set it down, size it, weigh it, and then call in for a permit to be able to throw it in the pile. That would have been the only other way that this could have been more government-like, to make it more ridiculous, to show more the government inefficiency. If you were to hire a private firm, a private business to come in there and do that, what would they have done? They would have had every single leaf, twig, log, or whatever moved in 10 minutes. And they would have been on to the next job. Yet we have government bragging about how they're helping us with 15 people moving firewood. My biggest question to this is, instead of you being over there with Border Patrol in Florida moving firewood, how about get Border Patrol to the border and move these illegal aliens out of our damn country?
I don't understand the point that you're making.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America. He's